just to back up. So when you say API, you mean letting third-party applications access Reddit communities and all the functions of Reddit without having to use the Reddit website or the Reddit app.
Phenomenal call on me, brother. Hello, it's Jeff Greenberg. I'm Greeny's Mac. Welcome to Star Wipes. We're going to sit back, get right into it. But before we do, of course, I have to introduce my dear friend, AV Guru One, Michael Kamas. Hello, Michael. How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. And I got to apologize. The reason we haven't done a Star Wars episode in a while is that during my Midwest swing with Shift Media and Keycode Media, I came down with COVID, and I came home and didn't know I had COVID, and then went to a user group and I became a super spreader. and I and
Ow.
I unfortunately got a lot of people sick. I've apologized profusely to all of them. I had no idea I was sick. I did test positive the next day, but everyone I've spoken to who did get sick is on the mend. So I apologize for all of our watchers and listeners out there. I've just been traveling and sick.
Dude, it happens. I will let you know that I'm about to do some traveling, just short stuff, but I'm making sure I can do a remote record of stuff. Because, like you, kids are not going on in my life. I'm trying to make sure we start publishing this at least twice a month because of, at very least, the joy it brings me and the stuff I love to share. And with that, we have not one, not two, but we have three controversies going on before we get into our standard Star Whites meet. And I'm going to start with our first one here. Today, by the way, is Thursday, June 8th, and that's particularly relevant because it looks like here on the 12th, Reddit is a lot of the communities are planning to go offline for 48 hours or possibly more. And I wanted to give you just catch you up because I don't know if you're on top of this. Basically, Reddit is doing sort of a PR nightmare thing. They wanted to do an API. They claimed that their pricing was going to be reasonable, not like Twitter. And not only does it seem to be unreasonable, but one, the way their pricing model is set up and the way things are done, they're doing it on very short notice, let's say within 30 days.
So,
They're,
Jeff, just to
yeah,
just to just to back up. So, when you say API, you mean letting third-party applications access Reddit communities and all the functions of Reddit without having to use the Reddit website or the Reddit app.
phenomenal call on me, brother. Phenomenal call. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go a step further. Reddit, um, they're about to go public as a company or trying to. They're trying to be an attractive darling out there because capitalism, they want to make money. And they're trying to probably push this even harder, Michael, because of the large language models like ChatGPT that you and I are big fans of, as well as the third party ones out there. But basically, the idea that they've got this massive amount of user generated content of human beings. And I often will do a Google search and add Reddit at the end just to limit myself to Reddit communities because the information is so great. And Reddit is trying to cash in before people duplicate all of Reddit's content and don't need Reddit anymore. And it costs them, of course, huge amounts, whether you're using screen scrapers and just loading pages manually or using their API to load stuff the way their third party tools do. And the PR nightmare is a pricing issue, which is their domain. That's capitalism. My real personal problem is some of the third party tools are the ones that allow accessibility, people who've got vision impairments to enjoy Reddit. And that to me is really like I don't think they should be implementing anything until they've got parity with these third party tools for people who, it would be like saying, oh, we don't want to let this particular race or this particular, in this case, disability have access to Reddit. And that's just inexcusable to me. They also, along the way, there was a particular developer, a darling of the Apple community, a guy known as Christian Selig, who makes a tool called Apollo. He was a intern at Apple, left Apple when he graduated, created this tool called Apollo that replaced a tool I use called Alien Blue. And he's made some decent money with it. But when they've been sharing this, they said, well, this is what we think it'll cost. He's like, great. It's a fast implementation. They took the darling of this Apple community that was part of the Apple community keynote with the Vision Pro. It was actually, mentioned there. And he figured out the pricing. The pricing was going to be about $20 million a year. Arguably, he has got people accessing to Reddit that he's said, hey, I'll just do a one-time, you don't have to have a subscription, you can do a one-time cost with me. So he has got no model for that built. And Reddit's doing all this fast. They're picking a fight with him in public, and it kind of stinks. So I'm watching Reddit here go, one, we're going to institute something that's going to cost money for users, third-party users. That's fine. Whether it's the ads or a subscription, that's what their service is. They're discluding people with vision issues. There are a lot of mod teams like my mod team who really rely on these mobile tools, these third-party tools to do modding better. I'm trying to think if there are, the speed of it's too fast. And I mean, like, this kerfuffle, this sort of thing has been happening over the last 7 days. And one of the real damning things is in a call that they publish notes for. Reddit said, hey, we got to keep the lights on, which means that a lot of communities are going to shut down for 48 hours. Notice I said a lot of communities. I haven't said anything yet on what we're thinking. But they pretty much, looks like they have the threat. They had a veiled threat in this notes. We got to keep the lights on, which says to a lot of us, we will take over your community or eliminate your community and let somebody else fill that gap. So that's kind of where the state of Reddit is. And just so we can see these links, Michael, here's that Fortune link. Here is, and this is only a couple hours old. This is Christian Selig, the user UIM that is. He just, particularly with some of this bad blood going on back and forth between these Reddit notes and him, he's just like, I'm closing down the app. And he was very, 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 just, if you read through this, he's very transparent about what the discussions were. And it all comes from this update, which is, I'm just looking, it's 2 months ago they announced there was an update. They didn't mention the pricing until like less than, I think, 2 weeks ago. So now that I've given you the ground there, what do you think, my friend?
I think use the term PR nightmare, and I think that's pretty apropos. There's obviously what is the legal letter of the law, and then there's goodwill and good faith and good behavior to the community that has made you to a point where you can have an IPO. I'm sure there are a lot of little things that could be done to help the relationship on both sides, but I'd be lying if I said this didn't scream like Twitter, right? With what Elon did with APIs and charging and whatnot, and this is going to be an enormous blow. If this does happen, not just for the 48 hours that some subs are going to go dark, but moving forward, if development is only done by folks who are willing to pay or Reddit itself. And during our pre-show, you had mentioned something that I think you touched on briefly, but it's the LLM, right? It's utilizing the data that Reddit has over these many years and being able to use that for structured data for LLMs. And I think maybe if you could address that a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't quite know how all that data sitting on Reddit in the form of question and answer is perfectly relevant for AI and LLMs.
Fill in, interrupt me at any time you want, but basically, we're at a spot where Google has failed us. There's so much content farming out there that we're looking for communities, and I'm going to use the words here, user-controlled, volunteer moderation communities of user-created content that is I don't want to say good as in like judgmental of political spectrum, just useful. There we go, useful. And these large language models have used this to train their vector based algorithms to be able to, when you put into chat gpt, tell me about something, it goes and it has weight and finds correlation and feeds back this information. And Reddit's amount of text based old school bulletin board stuff out there is gigantic. And a lot of the stuff was used to train these models. And Reddit is looking at these models making huge amount of money. And if I was going to do an IPO, if I was going to push Reddit into this sort of frontier, I would go, hey, wait a second. We're at this spot where we might become irrelevant for these models. They might start training through our API. We should now set a price to show how valuable our user created data that we own, because you check the user agreement. And a whole bunch of these Reddits, subreddits, intend to go private to lock out that accessibility, but to lock out the users to go, hey, we're going to protest.
Well, I understand that. As something we've talked about both one-on-one and on the podcast, is that there's going to be a huge market for privatized data models and renting those out for various uses. If the users, if there is a blackout, if there is the 48 hours, those are still Reddit controlled communities, correct? So that data is still accessible by Reddit, despite users and mod teams saying we're going dark for 2 days.
So one really uncomfortable historic callback, if you will, the CEO of Reddit at some point edited a user's post. Went in, said, I got the tools for this. I'm just going to change what that person said. They don't like to talk. Look, there are a lot of dark pieces of Reddit. And you and I, when I go and I talk to other people, I have to remind them that Reddit itself is a social media platform in the sense that it's, I don't want to say equitable. Everybody can access it. Let's do it like that. Mm-hmm. So could I create a hate book on Facebook and lock it out? Absolutely. But I know that Facebook could monitor it and may or may not decide to get rid of it. Twitter has now got the blue check mark system, and there are people who I'm going to go are classified as hate groups. I can say that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And have the blue check mark. And Twitter had a policy where they were like, nope, we're not going to have, and they're allowing that content. So if I criticize Reddit and I say I'm complicit by using Reddit despite this behavior or bad behavior, and Reddit's bad behavior in the past has been awful, Michael. From here we go, from jailbait, which is child porn, mm-hmm. to fat people hate shame or fat people hate, to like explicitly racist stuff. Reddit, just like Facebook, just like Twitter, has had these pockets of awful that are unfortunately our neighbors, our people in the world. The going dark in a lot of cases means there will be no content. That Reddit, if they wanted to, they could unlock the community and just delete all the mods and mod it themselves, or take the top mod out until the next mod down says, oh yeah, we want the community to stay alive.
In a perfect world, and I shouldn't say in a perfect world, if I asked you not to be an optimist, if I asked you not to be a pessimist, if I asked you to be a realist, how do you see this playing out? Because you've obviously mentioned that, yes, the Reddit could say, look, mod, you're gone. Next mod, are you in or are you out? You're out? Okay, next mod. How do you see this playing out in reality?
I've actually thought this through. I don't know if you're like intentionally feeding me on this one, which I appreciate. No. I think that you're going to see a large swath of Reddit go dark in 48 hours on Monday, for 48 hours on Monday. And by the
Mhm.
way, I'm going to push our wonderful editor, Rachel, uh, to see if we can get this live before then, because thankfully it'll be on YouTube, but people might not know about it. And, I wanted them to be aware of it. Um, I think realistically, a whole bunch of communities, let's call it 1,000 communities, will go dark for 48 hours. There'll be news coverage. A whole bunch of them will come back. There'll be some new cottage communities that come up. There will be um, some people who never come back. But if you were going to be a user, just a user, and you don't care about this, my guess is if your Lord of the Rings memes, one of my favorite subreddits, is back on Wednesday or Thursday of next week, it's gone for 48 hours, and they realize it's not getting Reddit to change their mind, because if you're at the corporate level, how dare you back down? Um, my guess is they're back in one way, shape, or form. And a week from now, this is a token item, except for the Reddits that stay dark.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the 48-hour blackout won't change a thing.
I don't think it's going to change a thing. I think Reddit at most will lose 25% of their users, and I think that is way high optimistic of what
I
they'll
would
lose.
agree. I would agree.
And they won't care because they're ad content, and the subreddits that won't. I think that this I think that the dopamine hit we get off of these tools is much too high for it to be world changing. World changing would be 50 to
Mhm.
60% of the users. I
No,
don't think it
I
can
would
hit that.
agree. I think the way most people use Reddit is that they will be back after a couple days, and their attention will have diverted for 48 hours, and they'll just drift back. Uh, if we take this to the end of the month, right, which is, as I understand it, when this cost per API call is slated to go into effect, do you think that data will budge? Do you think there'll be kind of a grandfathered in option, or where do you see the meeting?
The
The
interesting
striking
spot,
guilds. What do you
yeah,
see? Where do you see
which
them
which
meeting?
is which we'll make our next topic, by the way, because I think it's too important for us not to talk about, even if it's briefly. I think realistically, what's going to happen, Michael, is that Reddit. By the way, they've said in this notes of this 2 hour long call, something like, if communities don't go dark, we'll be open to extending that API date. I have a real problem with every one of those words. If they were to go, you want to be dark for 48 hours? Great. We're absolutely going to add 90 days, 120 days to this API. Clear communication. The idea that we're open to it is a Goliath negotiation trick. You know, they're acting, there's no good faith behavior there. Good faith behavior is, you know what? We botched the release of Final Cut Pro. We'll give you a year. We'll sell both apps. Reddit's thing should be, we'll take 6 months. We'll wait until we have parity and give you clear warning, 6 months of development time to decide whether or not you went in and out of the market. Reality is that they want to hit that IPO. They want to be able to release. And if they lose 25%, they can say to investors, look, we can pretty much do anything and they'll still stay with us. You sure you don't want to invest? I think for them, it's a win regardless. And it's very disheartening. I proposed, by the way, Michael, one of the proposals I had, aside from, hey, you guys do nothing until you are inclusive with your tools. But I'll go a step further. All these third party tools have got moderation capabilities, things that enable your platform for these volunteer people. If that tool has a feature your moderation tools don't have, you waive the API cost until your development team catches up with the indie developers. Now, I know that's a loophole, and I built it as a loophole idea. to
Yeah,
say
I like your altruism.
it's not altruism.
Your
It's
glass is a little bit half full there. I cannot
it
see
is.
that
They're
being
never going to
a
do it. They're
no.
never going to do it. But let me explain to you exactly what that is. That is what I would call social capitalism, where it's a win-win for everybody on board. The users win because they get moderators with better tools. The volunteer moderators get better tools. Reddit itself is bending their development to produce better moderator tools. And the moderation, if all the moderators would go away tomorrow, Reddit has a real problem because they cannot sustain the amount of traffic without it turning into a spam factory. And that really is the volunteer mod. I mean, user groups are a really close analogy. Generally speaking, if that one person who loves and believes in that user group goes away, the user group goes away because they're pretty much nonprofit volunteer based items. You and I were talking again in the pre-show about our favorite, my favorite. Uh, uh, I know it's your favorite too. Lapsy Pug with Michael Horton. If you're in
Laxy Pug.
LA,
No F.
oh yeah,
Laxy Pug.
do you know I was in Burbank and I said, Michael, it was time to rip off the Band-Aid and change the name, and the next meeting is the one they did. Um, my real feeling here is there's a quagmire. Reddit comes off smelling bad, but still viable as a corporation. These indie developers go away, and the average user kind of just goes, meh, I got my dopamine. And in that way, I feel like it's very Twitter-esque.
I'm having a hard time, at least off the cuff, getting the math to work in my head. Meaning, if they're charging that much for API access, then you got to imagine they're looking at something along those lines for using the subs that they own to train LLMs. And is there enough of a market to want to pay Reddit for their subs to train LLMs to offset what revenue may be coming via advertising? So I'm having a hard time reconciling that the money for API, unless for the moderation tools that we have now. I'm having a hard time reconciling how that is backfilled with revenue for being LLM fodder. I'm
I,
having
I
a hard
don't
time
think the
reconciling those numbers.
I don't think the revenue for LLM fodder is their major item. It just makes them attractive in the same respect that every new piece of software out there suddenly has got to have a .ai in their piece of information. Reddit doesn't. There's no such thing as a Reddit.ai. But since their materials have been heavily used as training fodder for these, it's money they're missing out on. How is Reddit and so Selig does, a quick napkin math analysis of, 2 or 3 years ago where they released a $100 million quarter, and how much money they made. And he's like, conservatively, they've got to have doubled that at this point, where they're a 400 to an $800 million minimum organization. Um, Reddit tomorrow, just say, nope, we're changing nothing. And they're still making a profit.
Mm-hmm.
They've cut 5% of their workforce because somewhere out there's some business analysis that says you've got to fire 5% of your people every year, which we at this point know is not an effective strategy corporate wise, regardless of what some consultant tells people. I'm at this space where I'm like, Reddit tomorrow could just say, oops, we made a mistake, and they're still making a profit. What we're seeing here is, of course, that land grab rush that's associated with this sort of tech space. And it's bleak in that respect. My real dark side is it's bleak. They'll shut off some communities that go longer than 48 hours. If it's a big community, let's call it 1 million subs, they'll just take it over. They'll just take it over or work down their list. Um, they'll
Or hell, I mean, they
apologize.
let go of how many people? They could free up salary for a couple people to
Yeah.
become paid moderators.
But paid moderation, doesn't work for Facebook. Facebook's not a
Yeah.
sustainable model with paid moderators. Twitter clearly isn't. And interestingly, I'm watching people talk about Twitter beginning to break, and the gears behind the scenes break horribly. I don't think that's going to happen. By the way, do you know off the top of your head? I do. How many employees Reddit has?
Well, you gave some numbers earlier,
Yeah,
so I'm gonna
I
guess,
should have
and I'm
asked
gonna
earlier.
say 1,800.
1,800. Yeah. They let go at 90 people, but some days I'm a little surprised that they have 1,800 people.
When I heard how much of the workforce Elon cut at Twitter, it just boggles my mind. I kind of want to see organization breakdowns and to see where all these people are, because it just astounds me how many people are employed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've said enough about this. I think this really brings us to, in fact, there we go. It brings us to something that's really related to it, which is the SAG-AFTRA members vote 97.9% in favor of a strike authorization. I feel where this course becomes crucial for the narrative scripted series, which we love the best. That says, based on what we watch on television, what we go out and see in the movies. This industry is that side of that top of the pyramid part of the industry is going to grind to a halt, and everybody's going to be conservative about what they do.
I can't disagree. I am really, I can't use the word ashamed, but I'm really surprised that other guilds in solidarity have not held out. One has, one hasn't. Go
Hold
ahead.
on, the one that hasn't is the DGA, and I believe prior writer strike, the DGA flipped on them as well. And meanwhile, the actors guild, they're like, no, we're in line, because if
Mhm.
you can replace the writer, how far before you can replace my voice and then my face?
That's certainly a concern. I mean, I don't want to make this all about AI and replacing a human,
It's
but
not.
obviously
It's about the
residuals
showering
and
of money. It's about the showering of money and who gets showered and who doesn't get who ends up in a dry desert.
right.
And
And
I think that goes right with this, by the way, my friend. In the meme level of Reddit, there you go. There's the writer's strike, the media support, post production, and there's our poor VFX artists who have been poorly treated forever.
poorly. Wow, talk about the understatement of the year. It's been an industry that has been burned by the corporate demigods for decades now, and it's amazing the amount of talent and a lot of facilities that have gone under because of the insane pricing and no protection for VFX artists, and it
My
astounds me.
favorite piece of pain is what was it? What was the one
That
that they won
ILM
the?
doc.
No. They won the Academy Award, but they won that with the
Oh, for
effects
Life of
company.
Pi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Life of
was that
Pi.
Digital Domain?
Yeah, I don't think it was Digital Domain. Maybe it was, but they won the Oscar, and I feel like it was the next day or the day before. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're bankruptcy."
Yeah, they were taking jobs at a loss just to stay in business and to pay folks because of the commoditization, unfortunately, of it and the outsourcing, and it's just a shame. I don't know if you have any of the other memes up, but there's that meme of a director on set alone because there's no actors, there's no writers, there's no one else there because, of course, the other two guilds are rearing up for a much longer fight.
I will tell you that did not come up. I will show you. I typed in director on set alone due to strike. This is what I got. And I'm just going to go here as tools and just say, hey, let's take the time period. Let's make it the last month. Just see if that gets us any better.
One of
Uh,
my pastimes over the past couple of weeks is just seeing what crop of witty signs that the Writers Guild has on their picket lines because they're hysterical. And it's like, that's why you're a writer. I couldn't think of that.
Writers Guild on strike. Scripts written by AI? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? R2FU.
That's fantastic.
Respect us. Pay us. Don't make us take a commercial break. Knives Out. pens down, solidarity is power. Yeah, man. I mean, I think everybody I know professionally or even associated at any level goes, this is unexcusable. It's just, how long do they have to prove you can't make blockbusters without writers and actors?
I completely agree, and obviously, when you start getting into unscripted work, that's a whole different phenomenon. But I'm interested to see the decline in revenue, if there even is any, with networks flooding the market with unscripted because that's what they can get away with various guilds on strike.
Do you mean where the editors are writers at some level?
Well, anyone who's worked in post know that editors tell a pretty mean story, whether they're writing it down or typing it out or just moving the playhead.
Yeah, I
But
mean, it's that story is told in screenwriting, in direction, and in editorial. And man, is it as ugly as the Reddit? Yeah, I think it's uglier than the Reddits. You know what? They're both ugly. They're both ugly things going on.
for what it's worth, for what my 2 cents are worth, I stand in solidarity with all of the guilds. Like I said, a little bit upset's not the right word. Disappointed that the Directors Guild, I don't want to say settled so early, but didn't act in more solidarity with the other guilds. But I stand in solidarity, obviously, with the Writers Guild and all the guilds that at this point that are planning to strike if need be.
100%. And I think we should move to our third topic along this line, and one that's got a pair of interesting pieces with it. The first one here, and this was 14 days ago. Unconfirmed, Avid explores a sell-off, and I do have to call out just for joy, PN 173903. Functional title tools sold separately. Man, holy, holy crap. Apple should just, Avid should just buy like New Blue or somebody to just put it to rest. And Real Stu Boggs Beggs says, guys, let's go all Wall Street bets on this. I say we pool our money and make Avid property of the subreddit. Man,
don't you remember the post a couple months ago where someone said, I know how we can acquire a majority stake in Avid. Here's
absolutely.
what we do. So I got to add some context to this because obviously when this came out about 2 weeks ago, my phone blew up. I don't even work for Avid, but my phone blew up, and everything seems to stem from a Reuters news report. I actually emailed the reporter to say, look, you cite sources, but I don't want you to reveal your sources, but have you corroborated any of this? Yes, Milana. Have you corroborated any of this? Because I also heard that hundreds of people were let go, but I have not seen anything about this in print. Well, virtual print. The folks that I've spoken to at Avid, when I heard about the layoffs, the unconfirmed layoffs, I reached out and said, publicly and to some people that I know there, hey, if I can help at all, let me know. And I've spoken to a lot of people, but no one has brought that up. I haven't asked point blank because I don't want to, rub salt into a wound. But I haven't heard of anyone in particular no longer working there. I haven't seen any more traction. Although what has been great is industry veterans, sitting around virtually or having a drink and saying, who would buy them? Would they break up audio and video? Would they scan the hardware? What would they do? So it's a great discussion piece, and I know I have companies I think might take that $1 billion bite, but it's a great thought exercise.
The funny thing is, and this is again part of today's Reddit discussion because it's been evidently a great couple days news wise along these lines, but they basically the discussion has been, wow, I just got extra light in here. Discussion's been like a decade old. It's a decade plus of You know?
Well, there's been the demise of Avid, and then who's going to buy Avid, right? And
Yeah.
those two always end up circling one another.
Right. Is it Sony? Is it Black Magic? Is it Adobe? Is it
But you know what? There's
is it
something,
Apple?
some of those are wishful thinking. Like Apple's not going to buy them. Adobe's not going to buy them. Just let's put that
Well,
out there right
Apple,
now.
Apple, it's not going
That's
to work. It's not going to work in the Vision Pro.
there's no reason for any of those companies to dump a million or dump a billion into that, even though the cost would obviously be a lot more than a billion. The how I see this happening is I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft, maybe AWS. There's already been a lengthy partnership with Microsoft, but I can totally see that happening, especially with Azure. Oracle wants to get in the M&E game. I think that's the dark horse. What I honestly see happening is that at some point the audio and video are split. Someone else buys audio. Dolby. I mean, that's I think an
It's a
open
natural.
secret. That's an open secret that Dolby has had interest for years in Pro Tools. I think a lot of the hardware probably goes away since Avid OEMs most of it anyway. When we talk about hardware, right? They have the Avid video file system, great, but the JBODs,
Oh,
that's no longer needed. The IO
the
devices have
the
been OEM for years. Go ahead.
what I think you're really saying though is basically Avid's core Unity company doesn't make sense for a buyer, but their intellectual property and Oscars and patents certainly make sense, whether it gets split up or not. And if you were a buyer and you might go, I got to buy the whole thing, great. And then your next job is to sell off the stuff you don't want.
Yeah.
If you can't part and parcel it out. I don't know. It's an interesting academic discussion. Avid is both, they've got so many problems, and yet they chart these seas in some ways better than any other company I've ever seen in staying alive.
I don't think I bag on Avid. I try not to, but I think Jeff, the CEO at Avid, has done just a magnificent, fantastic job. There were leaders before him, don't need to name anyone, who didn't inspire, who scared, who did not treat the rest of the purple community well. And I think Jeff is well respected. He knows his stuff. And for the stock to rise for the past couple of years, and to see some of the announcements they've made over the past couple of years, I don't think there's anyone else who's done a better job at the helm.
He's done a
So
phenomenal job
yeah,
in, given the way the industry has changed. There we go.
I think
Take
if this does happen, and again, we have no other sources to confirm this, Avid Media Composer is not going away. Pro Tools is not going away. It may not be as much as other editing software users. I mean, we know Media Composer is 90,000 roughly. We know Pro Tools has a couple 100,000 if memory serves.
you do
So
know,
it's not going away.
I don't know if you caught this. If you're a student, you get Media Composer now for free. Full boat
I
Media
think
Composer.
it's great. We saw Apple kind of pump that model through with Final Cut Studio, with having it just dirt cheap. We saw Avid make a decent amount of money when Pro Tools 3.4 was free, and how that helped get more adoption in the industry for folks moving off linear. So no, that's obviously
But
fantastic.
this
To
is
get them
but
while they're
this is a
young.
Coke. It's a Coke and Pepsi thing. And man, if I'm a college student, yep, I got a copy of Resolve. Yep, I've got Media Composer, and I'm going to learn it, even if it's going to go nowhere, for my future. Speaking of which, let's take a nice palate cleanser here, a nice deep breath. And this brings us to our standard
I was
topics. Yes,
hoping you were
sir.
going to throw up.
So, Mr. Thomas, because we've had such wonderful discussion about controversies this week, about things going on, and who knows if there's a Reddit next week. Of course, I conservatively think there will be. It'll be very interesting to watch it all unfold. Our short forms, let's just do this one here. I'm sorry, this is Career Ask Anything thread. This is from this week's Ask a Pro Weekly. I just thought this needed some attention. I'm a premiere editor trying to broaden my horizons by learning Avid, says MGUANTS, MGUANTS. Any resources where you can watch a pre-recorded video of an expert live editing an Avid. And I think both you and I have the same cynical thing that I mentioned in there. Man, that's somebody else's assets. That's going to be really hard.
No, I'm completely with you. Folks just don't have rights to show content. I think what would be very let me back up. Folks don't have rights to show the content that they're normally editing in Avid because they belong to someone else and they don't have the rights to that. What I think would be cool would be to have someone use Avid, contact Misha, right, over at Edit Stock, get
Edit Mentor?
the assets, and then sell advertising on it and do it. Have Avid sponsor it.
Oh,
I think
that's a
that's
phenomenal
great
idea.
idea. And then put that up as a master class, as a 4-hour master class online.
You know who would be the most likely, I think, group to do that? Do Black Magic.
I'm not going to touch that, man. Not going to touch that at all.
But yeah, Edit Stock, Misha Tenenbaum, he's a good friend of the subreddit, good friend of both of ours, wonderful human being. He will give you a scene for free for Edit Stock, but it's very cuttable, very usable footage that you're allowed to professionally use. I think that works. The other thing I was going to say is any level of internship / work in trades / working with somebody else in person, as hard as that is to go, hey, I'll bring my After Effects skills if I can sit back for an hour a day and just watch you edit on Media Composer so I can start helping you with Media Composer work.
I think that's great. And if you are bringing a skill to that editor that they don't have, then you're a resource when they need to outsource. So if it is somebody who's doing motion graphics or VFX, that's you're now one step closer to getting that extra work.
100%. I think that is one of the dear secrets, is bringing something to the table beyond being easy to work with and eager, which I think are your first step tiers of skills to have. All right. With that brings us to number our one short form, something that we thought needed a quick mention. And I believe this is yours. As an intern at a film agency company, can I refuse to edit a video after movie and interviews if it's filmed really bad? The shots were filmed all very bad. My opinion, the other editors think the same. The shots are shaky, has a low frame rate due to slow motion, and edit is no option. I started the edit, but I can't seem to get far because of lack of inspiration and creativity because it's filmed this way. The problem is that and I got a real problem with this sentence, my intern boss filmed it. What do you think? Can I refuse to edit the video any further before we do any opinion stuff here? This is a group who's using an intern boss with an intern editor for profit. I have problems here, Michael.
Flags there.
I have so many problems, so many red flags, so many dear Lord, this idea that we all want to be part of this industry is this sort of behavior is shark-like, reprehensible. It's awful at every level. And I want to hear you weigh in, but I just want to read the top comment because I like it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Making something watchable out of terrible footage is half this job. Better get used to it now, says Outsulation. And there's more to it, but it's a great thread to read through. Now, the whole form of short form is something that needs a quick mention. Michael, floor is yours.
I completely get the old school method of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just suck it up and do it. There are limits to that. But in this scenario, no, you want to be a better editor, you work with junk footage. That's kind of how it works as you improve your skills. Second of all, if we took this outside of the I don't like the footage, it's shot poorly in my opinion, and it becomes I don't like the political angle you're taking, I don't like the subject matter you're tackling. Sure, make that stand, but just know that management is, whether you believe it's right or not, management is not going to care too much. I hate to say that, but that unfortunately is, you have older folks in management who are the kind of suck it up methodology, which is you need to deal with this in the real world, whether you like it or not. That's how it's going to play out. And there's only a few places I've heard of. Normally, it's during the political season when you're doing ads for this candidate, where if your whole facility is doing that, you can say, "Look, I'd rather work on stuff that wasn't with this." I've heard of that working, but that's
Sure.
a very narrow space.
Okay, I got two pieces here, real short. One is, the call out you said of working with lousy footage. It's always astounding to me that the top editors and the top color correctors have such gorgeous footage. Of course, their stuff looks good because it starts better. You have a phenomenal actor. You have footage with Tom Hanks. I'm sure Tom Hanks has got a lot of bad takes somewhere, but I bet you it's a lot easier to make a great scene if you've got Tom Hanks material there to start with. The other, and it's just touching on your point, and I'll throw it in here. Do says an intern refusing any task is a terrible look, and I think that's the real button on that one. Anything you want to say before we move on?
It's not a black and white yes or no. It's not a binary thing. Interns can do this, they can't do this. It's a sliding scale, but this is not a hill I'd recommend dying on.
Definitely not a hill recommend dying on. Okay, it's time for long form, Mr. Kamas. Warwick Film says, I know it's been said before, but yeah, the market is pretty rough right now. I've been an editor for a decade, moved to Canada in 2021 from Australia, working commercials. Now got a steady gig and I'm fortunate for it. Lately, things have been stale. And looking at freelance, the availability of jobs and pay rate is terrible. Seriously, what's up with these 20 to 30 an hour rates? Guess it's time to learn Avid if I want any kind of stability and better pay. Sending my love to all the editors out there doing it tough. My friend, is learning Avid going to solve that?
It will help, no doubt about that. What I find very interesting is that we have the real world of Reddit, and then we have the other part of the real world, which is the market I work in, film and television and things of that ilk. If you were at HPA this year, the tech retreat that we had, you heard from almost every single presenter on stage, there is a shortage of editors. We cannot find enough people to fill those jobs. And then we come to Reddit and we see these posts where people are saying this has been the toughest time they can remember, not with the strikes notwithstanding. So you have to find some kind of overlap there. And the only thing I can conclude is that there aren't enough editors versed in the techniques and workflows that are used for feature film, broadcast television, etc. And all the other jobs that don't do that, whether it be corporate or industrials or real estate or whatever, those are the markets that are oversaturated because the barrier of entry is lower because you don't have to know those workflows.
Uh, it sounds like part of what you're saying is the jobs that exist aren't paying rates that keep up with, amongst other things, the economic needs of human beings. And the lean in, and I think it's a good lean in here from Dr. Bootygood. God, I love Reddit names. A year ago, a local ad agency tried to poach me for $52K. They wanted me to run a 5-person department. I declined. When I said they threw the kitchen sink after me after that, I just mean the cost of a Kohler bathroom sink because the next offer was $53,500. I think across the board, the struggle, Reddit, non-Reddit, is the tools get easier and easier and easier to do some base level work. And just because you can shoot well on an iPhone doesn't mean you should be an event photographer, but people will offer their services as being capable. I see loads of people on a daily basis going, I know how to use Premiere well. Therefore, I should be in that chair with no client handling experience, with no workflow handling experience, as if the sole prerequisite was, can I operate Premiere? with that knowledge base, of course, that if that's the sole prerequisite, then the next guy who comes in and knows Premiere can replace them for less money. The same reason that they went in the door is the same thing that's going to push them out the door in that regard. I also got into a discussion with somebody that these tools should be dead simple to use. And I kind of disagree. I think the entry level use of the tool should be dead simple. This was an Avid argument of all things, an argument against Avid. But I honestly feel that the illusionary competence that the easier tools give you doesn't give you strength to do really sophisticated quality work. I think storytelling is relevant in this regard. Your storytelling skills complement with your ability to work. You could learn iMovie if you're a great storyteller and win an Oscar using iMovie documentary.
Yeah, I think that argument is incongruent. I wish the software was easier to use, and I wish there were more high-paying jobs to use something that didn't take long to learn. And I think that though that argument is just incongruent, unfortunately. I will say, and I recently had an article published on this, is that our creative tools are structured so an average person can use them and learn them, but our tools aren't structured for people who may be on the spectrum or who may have maybe visually impaired. Or that may have ADHD and can't pay attention as well. Our tools are not designed. The creative tools are not designed to accommodate folks who aren't the main demo, and that's something that needs to be addressed. So I believe in that wholeheartedly. But the concept of making them easier and that will get more people to use it and then they can make more money, that is incongruent.
I think it's incongruent. I think that it's really fascinating to me. I have a theory. That Adobe, amongst others, changes functionality so they get less support phone calls. And I will show you this. I'll give you this as proof. This is a recent feature that I've been teaching people has changed. If you copy a clip and you paste it in Premiere, the way it works today is it pastes always to the track you cut it from. The way it worked 18 or so months ago is it went to the lowest targeted blue track.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you can go back and you can actually adjust it back to those controls. But I assume what happened was they were just tired of getting a user cutting a clip, going, I pasted it down here. Why did it go up there? And I
As
feel
someone
that way.
who's fallen victim to that tons of times, because I haven't done the target track, I could totally see where they would change the behavior just so they wouldn't get those calls. Sure.
Right. And I think that's the ease of use. And, you literally just said I don't know. I can't say Laxipug.
Laxipug?
Yeah,
Laxipug. No, not
Laxipug.
Pud. Not Pud.
I didn't
No,
say Pud. I said Pug. I said Pug. You might be hearing my East Coast accent, but I said Pug. Okay. Little dog with a G. G for Greenberg. G for green. Green is always the right answer. I think it's interesting here that Katie Brownie says, I think our field is highly saturated. And Bob's your uncle. Yes and no. More editors than ever, but I think a drop in market prices predominantly for digital work. Digital brought low budget video work to the masses. 100% of the jobs I've had in the last decade are from word of mouth and repeat business. It's still like a weekly thing we talk about here is that word of mouth is the prime mover of how we get work. Not our reel, not our LinkedIn, somebody who goes, man, you need to meet Michael Kamas. That's how that happens. I want to mention one or two more of these items, and then we should do a wrap because with our extra little hold, we're now at we've beginning to go long. I think this is a little depressing of a concept here. This is from Gangrene Banana. As someone who's been in school learning film and broadcasting for nearly 3 years, focusing mostly on editing, I am now realizing I'm mostly just wasted my time and money after seeing so many posts like this. Nobody, Gangrene Banana, nobody goes on the internet to say how great things are. People go on the internet. on Twitter and other places to complain about stuff. This is always the Adobe crash problem. Adobe is so wonky, it crashes so much. Unless it's not crashing for you, in which case you never think it crashes at all. You never say anything. I think I'm a little worried about Gangrene's putting together of a sentence. That's just me, reading the sentence live and going, "Oh, what's that?" It's a little awkward of a phrasing. Um, and I think film school or anywhere else is how you start networking. It's probably the best place to network because you're getting people at the beginning of their career. Somebody will become good. Maybe it's you.
I also think there's something to be said for foundational knowledge. Although I haven't cut on celluloid in 20 years, there are still so many terms and many things that are derived from the practice of doing that. And I'm not trying to justify my job or justify my knowledge base, but the industry isn't just going to reboot and everyone starts from scratch next year. There's still going to be years or even decades of knowledge ahead of before that is going to help you acclimate to being in this job industry. So when you go to school or structured learning, you are learning the things that came before, which will help you to adapt as to what's coming, as well as the aforementioned meeting people and networking.
Are you saying that foundational knowledge gives you something to build on? Because that's what I think you just said.
It's amazing that it's called foundational.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
weird.
Uh, let's call it a couple other good ones because I can see the one that might be a great spot to wrap on here. Uh, Acria Rising 4. It's not all doom and gloom. I just graduated and I'm employed at a solid sized post house. I know plenty of editors got good jobs. The industry will be okay. Again, that idea that myriad of voices. Uh, Lunar Giant Neil says there's still good pay out there. It's not easy to get a job, but the jobs can be quite decent. It's been paying my bills for years, despite it being my backup career. So if this is important to you, go in, be flexible, and build that work history. I love that words that be flexible, and it's a good laugh that it's his backup career. I got one more to do in here. That's uh, really the one that puts it together, and that's where we probably should exit. Fiscal Manin, Fisk Manin. Sure, I'm slaughtering that badly. It's slow stateside because of the strike, and the strike won't last forever. Economically, we might be heading into a recession. While that sounds dramatic, it's usually not so bad for people to look towards efficiency in their entertainment and discretionary spending, and the type of media we produce is very cost effective entertainment in comparison to other types of recreational spending. A streaming sub TV channel, YouTube, gives you a lot more time entertainment per dollar compared to a holiday abroad or a theme park or a meal at a restaurant. So it isn't a bad choice. Keep at it. I love that sort of comparison. But it brings back the strike.
I think we were seeing a lot of this before the strike. So let's not chalk it all up to the strike. And also, the strike only affects a small segment of the population, not a negligible amount, especially in New York and LA, et cetera. But this was happening on the non-union side for years. So
Yeah,
let's just not
absolutely. And this
use that
is
as the cause.
this is a 2-week old post. So I think that brings us to kind of my button hook concept here, which is, and I'm just throwing this out. I want you to think about it, and for our gigantic audience who's watching this, I would love to hear your opinions. Whether you send it to one of us personally, or post it on the YouTube, or hopefully the Reddit post that'll go up around this. Um, Depending on how much Reddit returns and how well behaved or poorly behaved, whether Reddit could still do something you and I consider reprehensible. I know editors will exist in some way, shape, or form, but I have a place for those of you who decide Reddit just isn't something you're going to go back to. I'll kind of announce it. I don't know if it'll be the next week, but it'll be before things come back. But outside of that, Michael, what do you think about taking this a little bit on the road? We mix in a little Twitter, we make it a little wider. I don't think there's anything out there where people look. at discussions and forums and posts? I just want to see if you're
No,
open to it.
I think there's obviously the kind of old guard of Creative Cow, right? Which I don't think is as much of a resource as it used to be. I think when we look at Facebook and Twitter and we're looking for hashtags, right? And then LinkedIn, that you have to wade into the groups, and the groups there are wow. No. But I think there definitely is a lot of folks out there who have questions, who want a community. And if the reprehensible portion of Reddit continues, that opening this up to other platforms, I think is a great idea.
I think Star Wipes as a concept works whether or not it's directly attached to always our editors. I think it's a good discussion of post production. And I think the only thing that would make that work for, again, our voluminous amount of watchers at this space, at this time, would be really simple. You would send us what you would like us to comment on and get involved with and act as our feeder line around post. Because is whatever form Reddit or Twitter is in, Michael and I can't look everywhere all the time. We need to start bringing in some of our friends. We're now set up to do that well. But uh, uh, we definitely should have that as a discussion as we watch what happens at Reddit unfold, the way we watch what happens with the writer's strike. And Avid's, of course, being acquired by, hold on, what would be really, but Avid should be required be acquired by Reddit. There you go.
Wow. Reddit Avid. You know what? The features would always have bugs in them.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have to care about a title tool because you could always type in old.avid.com. And just to go,
At least you'd get the old interface.
you get the old interface, and the player on Reddit would suddenly work, which we know doesn't work at all, much like Avid's malign title tool. As a wrap here, I'm Jeff Greenberg. You can find me at Greeny's Mac. You can find me at Film Geek on all the social networks. My compatriot, my friend here is Michael Kamas, AV Guru One. You're with Shift Media. What else would you like to plug in here, my friend?
5thingsseries.com, as well as michaelkamas.com, and at Michael Kamas on all of the socials.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And it'll be interesting to see how Reddit unfolds. And until
We'll see you on the other
next
side.
time. Yeah, see you on the other side, my friend.